Welcome back to Dear Future, the playground where creativity meets technology. I'm Suki, your guide through the extraordinary world of AI and art making, recording from sunny Los Angeles with the incredible team at Echo Bend Studios. Today, we're diving into the world of movement and storytelling with someone who truly embodies the art of motion. Joining us is Hokuto Konishi, better known as Hawk. From being a breakdancer to a member of the legendary Quest crew, performing on So You Think You Can Dance, and clinching an Emmy for outstanding choreography, being a judge on CBS's talent competition The World's Best, even choreographing for LMFAO's hit videos and touring with them all over the world, and being an Adweek Top 100 creative. I love that Hawk is on a constant mission to push the boundaries of human perception and to discover new expressions of beauty while working with world's top talents in the entertainment industry and brands ranging from Nike to Apple to Disney, Adobe, you name it. He's now diving into creating with AI. His journey is a testament to the power of persistence, innovation, and the endless pursuit of creative self-expression. And he is someone I am honored to call a friend and a neighbor, a very rare honor.
This idea that everything's been done before can be challenged.
I've been dreaming of a computer like this my whole life.
It really made me think more about how our brains work.
It's not coming from anywhere else. It's only coming from us.
Dear Future.
Welcome to the show, Hawk.
Thank you for having me. That was probably one of, if not the best intro I have ever had.
Yes!
And I genuinely mean that.
My life is complete. I can die now.
Thank you for having me.
It's really important to do that with friends because you know if you fuck up their bio, they're like, wow, I'm done with you.
That's who I am to you. Yeah.
Okay, so you have had a fascinating journey.
Yes.
Can you take us back to the beginning?
Okay.
I want to go to
How far shall we go back?
Let's go to your first encounter with technology and what your relationship to technology was like growing up. And then
I already like this because that's a question I wouldn't usually get on podcasts and interviews.
Right, because someone's like, you're an artist, tell me about your art.
Yeah.
But you're dabbling in this new world of innovation. Yes. Tell me about what your first encounters with tech were and how that informed your upbringing.
Yeah, I think my first encounter with technology was very early. The fact that my father worked for Sony, he's an engineer making mixers for musicians when we were in England. But then when we moved back to Japan, he was on the team that was making the robot dogs way back in the day and kind of diving into AI before AI was a word. You know, they probably use different words. But I think having those around and, I'll come back from school and there's a humanoid robot charging, being around that, I think was fascinating. And that was kind of a time, I was 15, 16, when I was really getting into dancing and running, popping and animation and robots. So you have me, a son that's a human, trying to move like a robot. And then I have a father that is trying to make a robot like a human. It was so ironic. Even the way my dad thinks, maybe it's an engineer thing, but just like analyzing, articulate, problem solving in a very different way through art, I kind of carried that along.
That's so interesting that you have the blending of these worlds of like human trying to be robot trying to be human.
Yeah.
What were the earliest indications of what you're doing today?
Yeah, so it really is a blend because even from back then, my father and I, we would discuss about how robots think. And I think he was trying to look at this cup and understand that it's a cup and you already know you shouldn't knock it over because there might be something in it. We don't even take those step by step. It's like we just know. But if you had to replicate that, you have to dissect it. We would always talk after dinner and stuff of just what it means to think, what we're doing. And it overlaps with kind of philosophy too, because the lines are very blurred. So I think I already liked exploring in that realm, whatever that is. And I think for the first decade or so going into dance and art, they didn't really overlap as far as I'm concerned. In the beginning, you're developing techniques. And it seems like it's so far away that it wouldn't merge. But I think once you have the tools and stuff, you get to really explore and everything in life, it just comes back together.
So you're actually an example of someone who I really see as a polymath. And I love that you brought that term into my world when I was asking you something. I think at a party, I was like, so what do you do? And you're like, I don't really know how to answer that question because I can tell you the canned response.
Yeah.
But really I do me. And me is creating
Yeah.
in all of these different ways.
Yeah.
And so let's explore that a little bit and how you started off in dancing. Where did you move to next? And really from this lens of being like a multidisciplinary, multi-hyphenate blend of so many different styles and inspirations. Like, what was that journey like?
Yeah. So started dancing in Japan as a teenager. It's funny because I definitely had a lot of great luck with the first time things. So when I was still in high school, the dance studio I was training at, they got a notice for this audition for a commercial. In no way I thought I'll get it, but I was just thinking, if I'm going to go down this career path, I should at least experience what it means, what an audition is, what casting is, because you just don't know, right? And I booked the commercial for the first audition I ever did. It was like the Japanese equivalent of 7-Up, very popular soda drink.
You became a face of a very sweet sugar water.
Exactly. And they wanted to capture that youthful energy,
They're like, be young.
Yeah. And I think I couldn't understand it then, but looking back now, it's like understanding what the brand needed. It makes perfect sense. So that was great. And I think I built a bit of confidence that, there might be something here. And then I think the last year of high school, there was a massive dance competition. I lived in Tokyo at the time where we were able to win that competition. So I think within our circle too, that was probably the biggest thing that we could reach out to,
The plateau of success in some ways. Was that the ceiling?
In our universe. I mean, I think within high schoolers at least, if it's like a whole adult division, it's a different game. But yeah, I think that was another thing of maybe there's something here.
So you're trying to say is you were always popular, which I'm into. You were wait. You were always a television personality. Just in the making.
No, that wasn't televised. That was more in the dance community. Oh, no, but the commercial, yes, it was. Yeah.
Always a burgeoning personality. Okay, wait. So you're with a dance crew. What is that?
Oh, in Japan?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I joined a crew called Kaiten Ninja, which means spinning ninja because it was a b-boy crew. It's so funny looking back now because they were so unique and weird, and I spent time with them every day. I thought that was normal, but they were all so strange and weird, but I think it was nice that we were able to be ourselves. And even till this day, some of the guys in the crew, they're the hardest working people I ever know, because tedious stuff I do, a lot of people are like, you're patient and you're hardworking, but compared to the crew leader I had then, I'm nothing, Wow. So I think it was a very good period of my time to build my foundation and discipline.
So you build this really amazing foundation in choreography and in movement direction.
Yep.
How did you get from there into directing films and directing projects?
I think it was such a gradual thing. It's so gradual to the point that I don't know when it kind of started or blended. I don't know if it was a thing that I always kind of did. But let's say choreographing a dance piece and editing a video, it's really no different in terms of what you want the viewers to go through experience-wise. You want to start off with something captivating so you don't bore them, and then you need a certain flow. If it plateaus, it's just boring unless you want to kind of create this wave and then lead it towards some kind of ending.
And a surprise, which is something you always talk about when we're collaborating, is like creating a kind of surprise ending or something that's unexpected.
Yeah, so fast forward after I moved to the States and when we were getting ready to compete for a show we did on MTV called America's Best Dance Crew. During that period when we were prepping, I was really diving into studying commercials and I would say short films, mainly commercials, I would say, because with the roles on the TV show, I think it was like 50 seconds, minute, maybe 90 second short routine. And you had to grab the viewer's attention and the judge's attention. And I think commercials were really good at that, to be able to take you on a journey in a short amount of time. And sure, the medium is very different, but I knew that there were hints that I can take from that and techniques and then apply it to dance. And it might be a coincidence that we won, but I want to, believe that some of the things that I was able to pull from it came in handy.
It's so cool how you see these disciplines as very mergeable, right? There's a kind of lack of boundary between them, between these fields that a lot of people are sort of hyper niching, bringing us to sort of today. We have these technologies that I think in many ways are merging all of these different skill sets or abilities that typically were like super entrenched. And so from the lens of boundaries buzzing up, what is your relationship to this new technology that's coming about, and how does your creativity play into your relationship with it and how you create with it?
So I would say, simply boiled down, the journey would be dancing, choreographing, directing / editing, exploring AI. It's kind of the path. And in the beginning, because I started off with this in the street dancing scene, you had to kind of choreograph everything you danced rather than a teacher just telling you everything. So I had such a hard time understanding, why is there a separation? Aren't all dancers choreographers? But then it wasn't till way later down the line that I understood that, some people are just great at executing things that are given to them, and vice versa. Some people great at giving those orders, maybe not the best executions themselves. And I think that was definitely confusing because it was blended. And in the same way in the video world, for the longest time, I couldn't understand what a producer was, because the way I started was, okay, I'm going to have an idea. How do I pull this off? And you put it together. So directing and producing, it wasn't a separate entity. So it took me a while. And I would just straight up ask my producer friends, what is a producer? What do you do? And they would explain to me. But in my head, the whole time, I'm trying to understand, because I thought that was a director's job. And I feel like I still have a bit of that.
I think that also comes from a world of very DIY making. Like, I came from that world in documentary, where I couldn't understand the difference between someone who had the idea, made the idea happen, edited the idea. So for me, like a producer, a director, a cinematographer, and an editor were all just a filmmaker.
Right.
Like, and you just do all of it because that's what I did. And didn't know what I was doing, figured out how to put the pieces together, messily cried over the terrible rough cuts, being like, I'm not a creative, fell into like the bottom of the pit of creative sorrow, where you realize like, I am nothing. And then you find yourself on the other side when you get an idea in the shower, and you feel like all of these pieces are sort of parts of the wave that you ride to arrive at this final thing. And having different parts of it almost like truncates a velocity that I'm used to doing myself. And I guess for you, this is in many ways an era that is designed for someone like you, because it doesn't really truncate the different jobs into these specific niches or specialties. It almost feels like you were primed for the creator AI era.
I mean, I hope finally things make sense. It's like, okay, this is why I had done things this way.
Well, so you were doing this, you were in this world of like everything is merged.
That's how I ran things. But then if a musical artist, like when we started working with LMFAO, the artist asked me if I can choreograph, and I had never choreographed for other people that much.
For other bodies.
Yeah. I would do it for the team that I'm dancing with, but not necessarily for just completely outside. So again, I think that was the first time luck thing. But the Party Rock Anthem, that was the first music video I choreographed. And it went, so there goes my perception of reward and choreographing for music videos. Like,
so for people who are listening and don't know, what was it called and where can they find it?
The artist is called LMFAO, and the song is called Party Rock Anthem, which, I mean, no one could have expected how big. I think it was just a combination of, I don't know, I think that how society was, what the demand was, just careless fun, really, that people probably wanted, and that just merged well with what we were able to provide at the time. And I think that was when we were fresh off of the MTV show, so I'm sure our fans kind of came to that too. And that kind of journey of choreographing and doing tours and working with other people, that whole wave started.
Being a viral choreographer.
I wouldn't say that. I didn't know.
Sorry, I'm just like blowing hot air. But
yeah, I mean, definitely it was a big thing. Once I do things, it's like, okay, what's next? And then I was working with an artist planning to do a music video, but then shutdown happened and we couldn't do any of it, but she still needed to release songs. So we decided to switch lanes to animation. And so I ended up taking on that role. And again, just DIY, never understanding. I don't know, actually.
And for context, you're talking about like paper cutout, stop motion animation.
This one was actually hand-drawn.
hand-drawn animation, painstakingly drawn.
Yeah, and I think it was at that project that I actually understood frames per second.
Anyone who's done any animating is like, oh yeah, that's a big moment.
Yeah.
You like spend 6 hours and it's like, that was how many seconds?
And the crazy thing is, you don't really have to know, as a dancer or choreographer, about frames, really, unless you want,
It's like beats, right? It's like how many,
Yeah.
like
but
counting.
Yeah, and it's such a tiny detail that in my head, I think I only knew either 24 or 30. So I didn't even think of, maybe you could do 12 frames. So I just thought, okay, 24, 30, 24 is less. Let me just draw 24 frames a second, 3 minutes. I have 2 weeks to finish it by myself. So let's just work on it every day, So very DIY approach, but yeah, I was able to learn so much within those 2 weeks, so much about movement that I hadn't even thought of. When you dissect something into 24 bits in 1 second, let's say, for example, something moves like a feather. Even if it doesn't look exactly like a feather, your brain will understand it as you're seeing a feather, which means you'll prioritize the movement more than the actual shape. Because basically our brains are doing so many shortcuts in our minds that we don't even notice. And I didn't notice that was one of them. I love those things, little things.
Well, I actually want to explore that in AI space.
Yeah.
Right. So we've kind of landed a little bit in like how you've gotten to this place.
Mm-hmm.
And now I want to get a little philosophical and exploring the sort of AI realm.
Yeah.
And so give me sort of few sentences of like what kinds of things you've done with AI over the last however long you've been experimenting with it. And then we're going to get into some more of the philosophical, juicy human perspectives behind using these tools.
Sure. First one was probably ChatGPT, just like everyone else. I think in the beginning, I didn't really know how to talk to it or how to talk with it.
With the machine?
Yeah, but then I think once I understood that if I talk to it as if I'm talking to an assistant, then it's really kind of helpful, because more so than the answer that it gives you, you have to know what to ask. And I think that little step makes you analyze and understand what you actually want. Whether or not the answer is perfect, I think that's bonus. But for you to kind of understand what you're wanting, what you're wanting to ask, that step, if you're just by yourself, you kind of overlook or skip or don't even get to that point, So I think that definitely helps. So ChatGPT, how I started, DALL-E came out, fascinated. Yeah, more recently, diving into Mid-Journey Runway, playing with more motion stuff. Kind of limited, I would say. But my curiosity and my brain not fully understanding is what I'm loving.
And I just want to name one of the projects that is actually how I saw your work before ever meeting you, which was the smoke thing you did with Nathan and Paul.
See, this is my problem. I can't remember it. So I completely skipped through.
Was that?
Yes. No, we did a little... Technically, it was kind of a test, actually. I discovered Paul.
And that's Paul Trillo.
Paul Trillo, yes. Probably from... I think it was the one where the clothes kept changing or one of
Shama's clothes.
Yeah. And I don't know if he posted it on his IG, but basically kind of like frame by frame and put it back in. And then I was just fascinated. I was just the dissecting of the information, adjusting and then putting it back. I was like, oh, okay, I see a little overlap in our brains there. And yeah, so we started chatting, and as a test, we did what would movements look like in smoke. And I think because of the limitations of how AI moves, smoke and liquid and something fluid, organic goes very well, at least with the stage that is right now or back then. So I think that was a great aesthetic that paired well. And then did some stuff with Nathan too, where it was same type of dance motion and it was mixed with animation. Highly controversial. I don't know if we want to dive that.
You can just mention it. You can just mention it.
Sure.
Yeah.
To me, it was very fascinating to create and be a part of something that one person can say it's the best thing they've ever seen, and another person can be highly offended it's the worst thing they've seen. It's technically the same thing, but it's completely 180 different. And that is so interesting to me.
Well, I just want to set also the context, which is it was a very similar sort of choreographed movement, motion video piece, but it was using anime sort of aesthetic. Yeah. Less of the like smoke stuff, but more anime, sort of traditional anime style. This was made with Nathan Shipley, who is one of our friends, amazing person who is now working, I think, at Puck. He was doing these experiments and using Comfy UI and Animate Diff, which is sort of stable diffusion software. And when it was posted, it was very controversial because people had very different opinions about whether it was acceptable or good or an abomination. And it was very interesting to it seemed like for you guys to sort of understand, like, whoa, this is really polarizing.
It is. I think whether something is good or bad, that's a different question. But for people to emotionally react in a certain way, in my head, I'm like, well, it isn't that art. Whatever you do, if it can do that to someone. And I remember when I first encountered conceptual art, when the teacher's like, oh, you can put an apple in a desert and bam, that's art. And my brain couldn't understand that because up to that point, I was thinking, no, you have to do it traditional way. You have to understand color science. You have to understand balance and just structure and everything. And the better you are at the brushstrokes, the a higher caliber the art becomes. But then with the introduction of that, it's the least amount of effort, but sometimes it gives more effect. And for a couple of weeks, I stopped going to class. And I was genuinely so upset because I couldn't understand it. I feel like there's definitely a similar overlap with my current state of understanding AI because I think it's, the kind of confusion that I went through since college. This is like the next phase that I'm kind of going through of rearranging what value is. And I know right now it's really difficult and confusing, but I also know once you're past that stage, you get to level up.
I love this messiness though, because I think I talk to a lot of people who are like, AI makes you lazy. And I'm like, no. Like my way of thinking is actually much messier. And it's much
I wish it was that simple. It would be so much easier to understand, but I think it's a bit more than that.
Yeah, so what is that process like for you? Because I know what it is in my own head, which feels a lot just like, what's happening? And like engaging with new questions, engaging with new mediums. What does that messiness look like in the chrysalis that you are currently inside of?
I think it was already kind of messing with my head of trying to understand it. And then just like everyone else in the world with the introduction of Sora, it was like, oh my God, what's going on? And, still people take things out of context and understand it in the way they want to. So having the information, was that generated like 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 1 billion, that completely changes how you see it.
Or 1 out of 10.
Yeah, or 1 out of 1, bam. But if I were to analyze myself, what's happening is, let's say, I don't know, a realistic dinosaur going through a supermarket, wrecking all the produce. To get a realistic video of that, in the traditional way, there'll be so many steps you have to take in order to execute that. That's kind of like the equivalent of the years perfecting a brushstroke. Now, if that can be just created with a text, the traditional order of values, it changes. It's almost like in my head, sometimes 7 is going to be smaller than number 2. And 8 isn't always 8, is sometimes the first number. And I think those orders changing is what I'm trying to wrap my head around. It might be a very abstract example, but to me, that's like the simplest way to explain the mess.
So let's take something that's like a concrete thing you're thinking about now.
Yeah.
Let's like think about a project that you're imagining in your brain. What does that look like right now in terms of the questions you're asking?
Yeah, so I want to create things that look like they're generated, but actually not, and look real, but is actually generated.
Okay, that's great.
I already was kind of curious where that line is.
It's such a trickster move.
I love it because, I've loved optical illusions. And the only reason why that works is because your brain makes those assumptions and those shortcuts. And it's usually such a handy tool to have. Every time you walk by a door, you don't have to figure out how to open the door. You just twist the knob and it opens. And that shortcut for everything in our everyday life come in handy, but in certain settings, it kind of does a little glitch because of the shortcut. And I'm just fascinated.
Exploring the glitch?
Yes, where that line is, And I also like it because it's not just information. You first-handedly experience that glitch.
The
which I can
confusion.
show you. I'll show you some. And it's such a trip because you logically can't understand why that's happening to you.
Right.
But at the same time, it does. And you kind of experience it. So I think that's the closest thing to like a outside world experience we can kind of have directly.
I love this.
Yeah.
Because it's very mischievous, and it's a way of exploring the tool not as a shortcut, but as a opportunity in and of itself to experience something new as a human.
Exactly. I think it's almost going back to, because we're humans, understanding why we perceive things in a certain way. And I think the crazy thing is, with each generation, that changes. So I'm curious, our kids or our kids' generation, they're not going to know a world where you can't think of something in a video can't exist. Wow, you can prompt a text and it can generate a video.
Right.
It's amazing, right?
They won't know a world without that.
Except just like the kids now don't know a world without internet.
Yeah.
The next one is going to be, well, if you can think of it, you can generate it and see it. Of course you can.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the norm changes.
Right. They call it AI natives, which is so interesting to think that someone can live and grow up in a world in which these intelligent assistants, and I think let's just say starting off with like an Alexa or a Siri, like Alexa, play me a song, you know, all of these sort of practices and like human gestures that have now really emerged in the last few years. Toddlers that talk to machines as easily as if it was another person.
Yeah.
And I heard this from a friend of ours. She's parenting 2 boys who struggle with, I think it's Downs, and her sons who have different cognitive, behavioral relationships to other people will have full conversations with Alexa and with Siri, but especially with Alexa, where they ask it to tell them things.
Yeah.
And also there was someone who I know, an older woman who has a son who has the same experience where her son has a harder time talking to people than he does to these machines.
Right.
So I guess
assuming there's less layers, right?
Yes. There's less almost like perceptive stimulation, so you feel like the interaction can be really simple.
Right.
And I guess for you as an artist, thinking about the next generation of artists coming up, what do you think that's going to look like?
I'm super interested. I can't wait till I start seeing a bunch of things that my mind can't even comprehend. I can't wait till it gets to the point that I really can't understand the quality.
Wow. Like what the genre is that's attractive.
Yeah. Hopefully I will never get to that point because I like to, be adaptive and constantly chase different things. But there's definitely going to come a point. It might be too far ahead, but I know I'm excited for that.
What are the limitations in your creative process now that you are finding yourself bumping up against as you try to build these optical illusions and collaborate with people with these sort of very different skill sets around AI generation, not just text to, but like also these other sort of models and things like that?
There's a lot of things that will take either way too much time or cost to create. Where if you set a certain parameter, you're able to generate that and kind of do a lot of shortcuts, not in the bad way. To me, there's so much value, not necessarily just the amount of shortcuts you can do, but if you can save that much time, imagine how much more you can make with the time you're alive, or how much of a bigger thing. I honestly see it as like a vehicle. If we could only walk, you can only travel so much. But if you have a car and an airplane and a rocket, the lengths you can go is insane to be able to expand everything that I do.
You also have traveled so much.
Yes.
Right? You've gone to over 50 countries. You are such an inspiration for me in terms of spontaneous adventuring.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially now. Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I was exploring for a presentation I was giving to a bunch of sort of film people about AI was like it requires a kind of explorer mindset. And that's something that I'd love to hear from you who already you've already developed this explorer mindset.
Yeah.
What are the things that you're exploring? And also what are the other aspects of a mindset that you've been
Yeah.
finding yourself in as you've been engaging with these tools?
Yeah. I think, well, to begin with, the explorer mindset, I'm more than anything, I think the thing that has helped me the most being in the artistic field is the fact that when I was living in England in a tiny village as a Japanese boy, I had to encounter being wrong. It's like you can try to say, no, in Japanese it's this, but in that environment, you're just wrong. That's not how it is. And the fact that when I was 12 and moved back to Tokyo, it did the same thing in reverse. So everything I had learned to that point, certain things, I was wrong again. And the fact that I was able to do both sides really opened my mind up to not just sticking into one way of thinking, you know? And I'm honestly glad that it happened in both situations, because if it was just one way, you would have naturally a biased way of thinking of, oh, this is how
Just British people.
Yeah, English people, and oh, they don't understand me because I'm Japanese. But when it hits you harder when you go back to Japan, you understand that, oh, it's not even about that, you know.
It's cultural.
It's cultural, depends on the environment, society, everything. So from a very young age, I want to believe that I was kind of more used to being able to let go of everything, you know, and relearning. I think every time I've gone through those, I've only gained then lost something. I think it's scary because you are going into an unknown territory, but track record wise, it's honestly only been good. So I think with this new AI tech, you know, there is a lot of worries in various industries of jobs being taken. You know, let's say if it took years of discipline for a dancer to perfect their craft in choreograph, and it took a week to come up, but now it can be done in a second. I think there's something more amazing there than, you know, be scared about. Because if it can make it in a second, then that's a week and minus a second of your time freed up that you can use your energy elsewhere, you know? And like, for example, if you're able to feed every single dance and movement that has ever existed so far in all the cultures, feed that as data and be like, can you spit out a new potential cultural dance that has never existed in history? I'm so interested in that because a human being can't do that. And I think that's the real way and the proper way to use the tech, not, oh, I'm against it. And it's like, I'm either going to do the job or you're going to do the job. It's like, no, let's try to have a conversation and find a way that we're able to create new things that otherwise we wouldn't have. Because isn't that the whole point?
So what's really interesting about that is I just talked to this researcher at MIT, and he was saying there's a movement from AGI to AHI, augmented human intelligence. And I think there's something really interesting in that parallel of like seeing AI as an augmentation of these superpowers we already have. And how can we think of it not as an other that we are competing with, but actually a companion to help us explore places we've just never explored before.
And honestly, I think what we forget too is, you know, with these new stuff, it's easy to look at now and then the future, but also understanding that compared to our past, our current is the future from back then. So everything that we take for granted, if you see it from the perspective of that past, is an amazing thing. And I think to be able to see things both ways is very kind of important.
You're a time traveler.
Time is not real. No, but really, it's you know, there's so many changes. I think if you compare it to back in the day when the entire world was ran by religious beliefs, and that's all it was, and there was less of science. The idea of surgery, the idea of opening a human being, opening up another human being to possibly fix this disease you don't know about. That's outrageous from minds back then. But now, fast forward to current day, if there's a disease that you can't fix with surgery, it's a no-brainer. If it can come that far from how dare you do God's work to modern day science, then with the whole change that's happening right now, of course it's going to be the fear, but I see it as the same equivalent fear people probably felt back then.
Right, it's just change.
It's just change. And I always tell people, as long as it's changing, I don't think we need to worry. I think when it doesn't, that's probably when we should start worrying.
That calcification is the enemy, not change.
Yeah.
that also makes sense with who you are, right?
Yeah.
Like, it
That's
sounds...
true. Oh, ooh, yeah.
Like, I think that is very true based on where you come from, right? I'm also a third culture kid. And for people who don't know, it's like someone who's grown up in more than one culture and had to assimilate to a different cultural norm or background. Like for me, it was Morocco, France, and then the States. And for you, it was Japan, England, and then the States as well. Yeah. And I think that there's an interesting phenomena that you see with third culture kids where there's like you are forced to see the ways in which your understanding of the world is deeply subjective. Like from a young age, your brain is constantly confronting change and constantly having to learn. So much so that you realize a part of reality is learning and managing change. And when things aren't changing, that's when you start to get freaked out. Because that's the norm of your nervous system. And so I think it's also really amazing that like third culture kids are going to rule the world.
They haven't already. And I think because we're able to detect things before the majority does.
So it's like we're like the indicator species.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important skill or sense to have. Like a skilled pilot can sense a tiny change in the air, whereas a newbie, eventually they would, but sometimes at that point it's too late. So I think to be able to smell that before other people do in any fields, I think that is an important sense to have.
There's so many things I want to talk about, but for now, do you have anything that you want to share as we wrap up that I haven't asked?
I mean, I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg. It really is. And even, I think, whether it be technology or philosophically, can go way deep. This is really just like we explored the first floor, maybe second, but that's about it, you know. But I guess we'll discuss that on our next live taping of the podcast with live studio audience.
Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, I think you're right. And it's also the reason why I called this podcast Dear Future. We're sort of writing the letter to our future selves, being like, here's what I think is going to happen. Here's what I'm afraid of. It's kind of tempering our future ideas of self to like this time and really arriving here.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to say a huge thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here and for sharing all your wisdom and your perspective and sharing more about your background, because I think it's so helpful for people to know who are the people that are making stuff with AI. It's so easy to demonize someone on the internet for using these tools when you don't actually understand what goes into their process.
Right, we're all humans, right?
Yeah, we're all just artists trying to learn new tools. Yeah. And thanks for stepping into these new realms of creativity, technology, human impact.
Yeah, it's gonna keep going.
All right, so wrapping up, thank you to everyone who's listening. Shout out to Echo Bend Studios for being our production powerhouse, and to all of you for making Los Angeles not just a city, but a community of dreamers and doers. And remember, the future isn't just something we predict, it's something we create. Until next time, I'm Suki, reminding you to stay inspired, stay curious, and keep dancing to the beat of your own drum. See you in the future.
Dear Future.